Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our speakers and participants from different time zones. March 2023 marked the inaugural Global Leopard Conference, which brought together hundreds of conservation practitioners in the first ever international gathering dedicated to the leopard. As a lasting legacy of the Global Leopard Conference, International Leopard Day was officialized and endorsed to give it a permanent and meaningful place on the global wildlife calendar, encouraging conservation fraternity to act to save leopards. On International Leopard Day, we come together as a global community to celebrate the undeniable allure and ecological significance of leopards, a species that epitomizes adaptability amid environmental challenges. So today's webinar, it provides a timely platform to recognize not only the critical role that leopards play in maintaining ecosystem balance, but also the urgent need to address the complex threats they face today, from habitat fragmentation to conflict. Bringing together conservation practitioners, policymakers, and community leaders, this session aims to foster collaborative dialogue and share innovative solutions that span local and international contexts. On behalf of IBCA, we welcome you all and extend our heartiest gratitude for sparing your valuable time to make the webinar successful. Uh, as per the schedule, the first speaker, the welcome address was supposed to give by Dr. S.P. Jadhav, Director General of IBCA. However, because of his preoccupied travel commitments, he is not able to attend today's webinar.
Happy International Leopard Day. Good afternoon, everyone, and I would like to welcome all of you to today's webinar organized by the International Big Cat Alliance to celebrate International Leopard Day. Today, we gather to recognize and honor one of nature's most magnificent creatures, the leopard. These majestic big cats are not only symbols of strength and beauty, but also vital components of our ecosystem. As apex predators, leopards help maintain the balance of their habitats, influencing the populations and health of various prey species. However, despite their resilience and adaptability, leopards face significant threats across the globe. From habitat loss and fragmentation to poaching and human wildlife conflict, their numbers continue to dwindle in many regions. According to the IUCN, leopards are currently classified as vulnerable, with certain populations listed as endangered. This alarming trend underscores the urgent need for concerted conservation efforts. Today, we will delve into the various challenges leopards face, exploring the implications of their declining populations on biodiversity and ecosystem health. We will also discuss successful management strategies and conservation practices that have shown promises in various parts of the world. It's crucial that we come together as a global community to ensure that these incredible animals not only survive but thrive for generations to come. Our speakers today include conservationists and wildlife experts who are dedicated to leopard conservation. They will share their insights, experiences, and innovative strategies in managing leopard populations and their habitats effectively. Together, we can raise awareness about the importance of conserving leopards and foster a greater understanding of how our actions impact these beautiful creatures. Thank you for joining us today, and let us embark on this journey towards conserving the leopards and protecting our planet's biodiversity. Thank you
Therefore,
once again.
we'll proceed with the second speaker. We'll start our technical sessions. So we have four eminent speakers with us, six eminent speakers with us today for this session. We'll take up the questions and comments from our participants at the end of each talk. I would also like to request all other participants to keep their microphones mute while the talks are undergoing. Is Dr. Govind Sagar Bharadwaj is there? Not yet. Okay, then we'd like to invite Dr. Igor Khorozan as a first speaker for the webinar. Dr. Igor is a co-chair of the Persian Leopard Working Group, independent biodiversity consultant in Germany, senior scientist at Scientific Center of Zoology and Hydroecology in Armenia, and biodiversity task leader at WWF Armenia. In his role of the co-chair of the Persian Leopard Working Group, Igor coordinates the work of members from 12 range countries and beyond, promotes awareness raising through the website and social media, helps mobilize people for professional training, prepares reports and other publications, and holds on other administrative duties. Author of around 68 scientific publications, the main professional interests of Igor lie in large carnivore ecology, conservation, and promotion of coexistence with humans, especially in relation to Persian leopards and other big cats. Over to you, Dr. Igor.
Thank you, Kauzik, for presenting me. Just let me share the screen.
Yes.
And do you see it? You see it now full screen?
Yes, is visible.
Okay, good. So I try to keep it short. You know that I can speak about Persian leopard for hours, but I have only 10 minutes. So I'll try to summarize the main most relevant topics. And first, I want to start with the status, which is endangered on the IUCN Red List of threatened species. It was most recently assessed in 2023. And in a previous assessment, which was also done by me in 2008, it was endangered as well. So, and what are the main characteristics and reasons that it's endangered? Numbers definitely less than 2,500 mature individuals. It has a decline observed or projected, and each of the four subpopulations numbers less than 250 mature individuals. And here on the map, you see where these four subpopulations are located. The first of them is the Caucasus ecoregion. The second is northern Iran and Central Asia. The third one is southern Iran, Turkey, and Iraqi Kurdistan. And the fourth subpopulation is in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And most recently, I also had the pleasure to be involved in the green list assessment of the Persian leopard, which is among the first such assessments among the wildcat species. It's under review now, and it shows that the Persian leopard is largely depleted. And generally, the green list assessment, it shows it's not just an opposite of the red list assessment, but it shows how the population responds to conservation efforts and what's the potential for population recovery. Generally, the population size is over 700 to 1,000 individuals. You see how they are distributed among four subpopulations, and most of them are living in northern Iran and Central Asia. But there is a huge uncertainty about the numbers in the Caucasus ecoregion and the eastern range, because in some countries, like in the northwestern part of Iran or in Afghanistan and Pakistan, we don't know how many leopards are living. So we don't even have approximate projections about that. So yeah, we need to always consider them and that and take into account in all these estimations and assessments. The distribution, the current distribution and the historical distribution looks like this. You see that this light yellow color is the historical distribution. It covered most of the region of Southwest Asia. But since the mid 18th century, with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, with the advent of firearms, machinery, and other technical advancements, Persian leopards have lost 72 to 84% of the historical range due to persecution. And one of the main threats to Persian leopard existence in the wild is habitat loss and fragmentation. And you see here on the map how it looks like. We have five populations which are potentially capable of holding viable populations. So far, none of them holds a truly viable population. Even the largest ones, which are Alborz Kapadak Mountains in northern Iran and Turkmenistan, it's number two, and the Zagros Mountains in southern Iran, and Iraq, and Turkey. They are not viable yet, but they have highest chances to become so. And generally, the range is represented by a patchwork of differently sized habitat parcels, which are usually not so large to hold viable populations. The main feature of the leopard distribution is the core habitats, which are defined in our most recent assessment as the 1 by 1 kilometer grid cells with habitat suitability index higher than 25th percentile in presence locations, and which are larger than 250 square kilometers, which is the minimum area holding breeding populations as it's estimated in Iran. And we have currently 174 islands of core habitats and 173 corridors linking them with each other, and an average length of these corridors is not so short. It's about 31 kilometers. Most of these core habitats are located in the largest range countries, which are Iran, Turkey, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. But the sad reality is that only 53 out of these 174 cohabitats, so it's only 30% are currently occupied. So they are potentially suitable and occupied. It means that 70% are suitable but not occupied. And the main reason of this non-occupancy and suitability is the conflicts, large-scale conflicts, and intense persecution to alleviate these conflicts, mainly in Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. What about the protection of these core habitats? You see that these four largest countries holding most of core habitats, they have very low percentages and coverage of protected areas, which is not only determined by their large areas, but also because they are financially and internationally neglected, politically neglected, which impedes proper funding and capacity building of these countries. But in contrast, the other countries which hold much smaller areas of core habitats, they have much larger percentages and coverage of protected areas. And it's caused not only by the smaller areas, which are easier to be covered by protected areas, but also most of them, they were formerly parts of the Soviet Union, were protected areas of the categories, IUCN categories 1 and 2, which are strict reserves. They were very common and very widespread, and still these protected areas, they stay there, and they ensure the survival of Persian leopards there. The two main features of habitat loss and fragmentation for Persian leopard and generally for wildlife is connectivity and permeability. In this study, connectivity was the length of least cost corridors connecting occupied and unoccupied core habitats. And you see on the right picture that the three areas, the Caucasus, Zagros Mountains, and Hindu Kush, they have the highest connectivity. So they have quite short corridors between these occupied and unoccupied habitats. And permeability is the probability that species would move through a corridor, and only two areas have, this yellow color, which indicates the highest permeability. There are only two regions of the Caucasus and the Zagros Mountains which have the highest permeability. So combining these two parameters, we define the best candidates for recovery to reach viability are the two, the Caucasus and the Zagros Mountains. The other threats to Persian leopards are illegal killing, which is mainly by shooting, but also poisoning and trapping in some localities, mainly in response to livestock depredation, because attacks on humans are very rare. but they always get disproportionate attention in mass media and promote persecution. Up to 80% of human-caused mortalities in Iran are caused by conflicts because of livestock killings. And also the same issue is in Afghanistan, especially Pakistan. From Pakistan, we get such records every week or a couple of weeks or a month about killings of leopards in different parts of the country. But in recent times, we have some projects, and the awareness is starting to increase there slowly. Another threat is prey depletion, which is also caused by hunting and poaching, which in many cases goes simultaneously with illegal killing of leopards. And prey depletion causes increased attacks on livestock and other prey species, which are still common. For example, in Muslim countries where pork is not consumed, wild boars are overabundant because they are not hunted and they provide the main prey for Persian leopards. It's like in Iran and all other countries. Yeah, climate change is another threat to leopards, but here it's quite a tricky uh, thing because we need to find a trade-off between habitat loss and gain because of this climate change. Because in some areas we experience habitat losses when suitable habitats become unsuitable, but on the other hand, we have previously unsuitable habitats becoming suitable. So we have this balance of gain and loss. And we expect that Persian leopard, as a generally adaptable species, it will be quite tolerant to climate change. But as many other carnivores, leopard is quite tolerant to habitats. It's a generalist, and it's not confined to particular habitats. But it's rather sensitive to the status of prey, and ungulate prey are much more sensitive to climate change, especially in arid areas. And it also depends on how it depends on the effects of droughts and floods on viability of ungulate populations. So the effect of climate change on leopards is quite indirect through prey populations. About coexistence with humans, it's a global trend now to reformulate human-wildlife conflict as human-wildlife coexistence, because in practice, we experience not conflict between humans or wildlife, but conflict between different human groups and different stakeholders with different priorities and interests. And this reformulation, it looks quite theoretical, but in practice, it stimulates balance between biodiversity conservation and local livelihoods, and also involves different stakeholders into the forum of negotiations and the experience sharing. Here I want also to present a couple of studies that I led in Iran on applying different interventions, trying to look at how they mitigate conflicts by reducing livestock losses to leopards. And one of them was the effect of these studied leather collars, which we put on the necks of cattle that graze in deep forests, and they are generally attacked by leopards because they are not attended by shepherds and dogs. And we observed that none of these collared cattle were killed by leopards, in opposite to uncollared ones. And we arranged this as a scientific experiment with the treatment and control groups, and that experiment was quite successful. Another study showed how effective are shepherds and dogs in reducing losses, and they were both ineffective because you see on the graph the numbers of attacks and sheep and goat losses, they didn't differ much whether shepherds and dogs were present or absent. And it's mainly caused by ineffective practices used to avert leopard attacks. For example, shepherds, they were generally reacting by throwing stones and shouting, which was generally ineffective. And dogs in Iran are not properly trained to avert leopards and other predators. They just fear them and they bark and run away, or they can be killed by leopards for food or just in retaliation in aggressive attacks. So in Iran, which is the main range country, we need to work seriously with shepherds and with dog training to make them effective conservation tools. What we have in conservation of Persian leopard in the region, generally we have this traditional approach of protected areas, of which is a land sparing approach. But you saw on a previous table that the coverage by protected areas is very variable in the region, from 2% in Afghanistan to 36% in the Russian Caucasus. So, and only few protected areas, all of them are in Iran, are large enough to provide space for viable populations. So we need to apply land sharing with local communities and local landowners to involve them in conservation. Generally, leopard is officially protected and it's a strong flagship for conservation in all the range countries, but there is a lack of political will, funding, and capacities in most of the range countries. What is a very nice experience that we need to learn from is in Iran. They have a long-term practice of establishing temporary no-hunting areas for 3 to 5 years just to recover local wildlife populations, mainly of ungulates. And they don't take this land away from the local ownership. So the land remains in local people's hands, but it's just used for conservation for a certain period of time. Generally, this is quite a common approach, but as far as I know, there is nothing known about how effective these areas are. So we need to study and learn how this approach works and possibly to replicate it in other range countries. It was a very successful experience of Azerbaijan to declare the hunting ban in the Nakhchivan Republic in 2001, and it was one of the main reasons of the recovery of ungulate populations and leopard in the South Caucasus. And also we have different leopard-focused conservation projects of different scopes and durations in the South Caucasus countries, in the Russian Caucasus, which is the range reduction project, also in Central Asia and other range countries. And here just a couple of words about the success story of the leopard recovery in the South Caucasus that where I am living in, and I am well aware about this project. It's the longest known Persian leopard conservation project in the region, which lasts from 2002 with the coming of WWF in the Caucasus. It's coordinated and managed by WWF offices due to support from the German and Swiss offices. This project includes non-stop processes of monitoring, population monitoring by camera trapping, capacity building of protected areas, community involvement training, and awareness raising. And as a result, during these 20 years, the population has increased from just a few individuals to up to 25 to 30 individuals in Armenia and Azerbaijan. And you see on the maps a dense network of protected areas, transboundary protected areas, and also the grid of cells for monitoring, where we permanently do monitoring by camera traps. But still, there is a serious concerns which are potentially inbreeding depression, because we have a very small founder group of interrelated females and males. We have insufficient habitat connectivity in spite of a good protected area network. And we generally have a dominance of males. Part of them are resident, part of them are dispersing. So we have kind of limitations in movements of females over the whole population. The official formal conservation network framework is that the leopard as a species, it's included in the Appendix 1 of the CITES Convention and in Appendix 2 of the Berne Convention. It's also part of the Convention on Migratory Species, and most recently in 2024, the range-wide strategy for the conservation of the Persian leopard was developed and approved by the range countries. And this strategy was developed by the CMS and its Central Asian Mammals Initiative. And our Persian Leopard Working Group was established in 2023 just with the main purpose to boost the implementation of this strategy, and it's officially affiliated with the IUCN Cat Specialist Group. A couple of words about our group. Its main activities are networking, professional training, awareness raising, capacity building, fundraising, and publishing. And we still strive to get funds for long-term administration work about to promote status monitoring over all the range over 25 by 25 kilometer grid cells over all the range countries. We need to develop strategies and apply them to mitigate human leopard conflicts and expand the main activities which are listed above. Currently, we have 52 members from 16 countries, including all 12 range countries. We have the website and several social accounts in Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You see the screenshot of our website, and you are welcome to visit them, and particularly to visit our library, which contains lots of publications, most of which are available for free download. And finally, just a reminder that we shouldn't let them go. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Igor, for providing a wonderful perspective on Persian leopard conservation. You would now like to invite questions for Dr. Igor. There is already a question. There are a couple of questions. One is from Mr. Soumitra Dasgupta. How leopard conservation can address climate change?
Uh, it's vice versa. It's not we address climate change by conserving leopard, but we conserve leopards by mitigating climate change. The best we can do at these local scales is to, for example, apply these reforestation and habitat restoration projects that we also do. But the main way to mitigate these adverse impacts is by recovering prey populations and by restoring this water supply, because in many areas we have this water deficiency issues, and yes, this is how we can deal with it at local scales.
Thank you. There is another question by Aliana Norris. Thank you for the great presentation. Leading from leopard dog interactions, are there any diseases known to be present in the leopard populations or in the local domestic dogs that may affect leopards? Also, are there populations of feral domestic dogs that may act as disease reservoirs and fight or compete with leopard in the area?
As far as I know, there is no specific study of disease transmission. Potentially, it's possible that the leopard population would be affected by canine distemper as in other areas, but it's just a potential scenario. Nothing is known about that, and we don't know cases of mortality from diseases in such quantities to worry about some epidemics or disease outbreaks. But I led one study again in Iran, and it showed that vaccination rates they were associated somehow with by affecting by increasing attack rate leopard rates on livestock. So in the areas where dogs were less vaccinated, dogs and livestock, they were more attacked by leopards. And it was my initiative after that research to promote some kind of cooperation with veterinarian services in Iran to address these issues, to see how these. Indirectly, it shows that these weaker individuals would be more affected by leopard attacks. It's possible, but we needed more research, and unfortunately, we had some problems in Iran in that period, but nothing followed. But this is actually a very interesting topic to see how diseases affect vulnerability of domestic animals to leopard attacks. Thank you for this
Thank you,
comment.
Dr. Igor. There is a last question. Okay, there are a couple of questions. One is from Mr. Shiladitya Saha. How volatile political situation of the region affecting conservation?
It depends on a particular country. I cannot speak for all the countries, but uh, for example, from my region, which is also heavily affected by political tensions and wars, for example, between our Armenia and Azerbaijan, we still succeed to jointly protect leopards. You've seen that network of protected areas in Armenia and southern Azerbaijan. There are no diplomatic relationships between our countries, but we cooperate through Georgia, through the regional coordinating WWF office, and we have protected areas merging each other on both sides of the border. So we do it independently from both sides, and it works because leopards don't recognize borders; they just freely move between the two countries. But it's possible. And transboundary cooperation is a very key very key issue. And recently, another co-chair of our group, Dr. Mohammad Faradini, published a very nice paper in Oryx about promoting transboundary cooperation to protect Persian leopards and other leopard subspecies in Asia. It's a very important issue because countries differ very much in their conservation agenda and capacities.
Great. This is the last question for you. What is the impact of landscape connectivity on the movement patterns and gene flow among fragmented populations of Persian leopards in the Caucasus and Iranian plateau?
That's a very good question. And just recently, we prepared a report about the recovery of leopard population in the Lesser Caucasus, addressing all these issues of connectivity and gene flow. Uh, there is no genetic research done so far to address this issue directly, but we are very serious in raising funds and promoting this genetic research because we expect that gene flow is quite limited in the area because we have this very small founder group and we have very limited, if any, immigration of leopards from a larger population in northern Iran to the Caucasus. So we generally rely just on our own leopard population with very limited movements between the Caucasus and Iran. What we can do, we can stimulate leopard conservation in northern Iran, and jointly we can do the best we can in this direction. But yes, connectivity is a very serious issue for us, even though
Thank,
leopard is a very mobile species.
thank you, Dr. Igor, for your talk
Thank
and
you.
wonderful interactions.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, we would now like to invite Dr. Andrew Kittle as the next speaker for the webinar. Dr. Kittle is a zoologist and co-founder of the Wilderness and Wildlife Conservation Trust in Sri Lanka. In addition to conducting research on the Sri Lankan leopard, Andrew has studied the behavior and spatial ecology of large carnivores across systems and continents, including wolves in North America and lions and hyenas in Eastern Africa. Andrew has been a member of the IBCA's International Cat Specialist Group since 2002 and is an assessor for the Sri Lankan leopard subspecies, as well contributing assessor for the fishing cat, jungle cat, and rusty spotted cat. Andrew's peer-reviewed research has been widely published internationally. Over to you, Dr. Andrew.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I will try to get on to the talk quickly because I know we don't have tons of time. Let me just share my screen. Okay, can people see?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to talk about an initiative that sort of a case study initiative of conservation that we are conducting in Sri Lanka, in the central highlands of Sri Lanka. It's called the Corridors for Conservation, and basically it's the establishment of protected corridors using a collaborative multi-partner landscape level approach. I'll just give a very brief background about the Sri Lankan leopard, Panthera pardus kotia. So one of the 9 genetic subspecies in the world. It's endemic to Sri Lanka, where it is the apex predator and has been for thousands of years. We estimate that there's fewer than 1,000 mature individuals in Sri Lanka, so it's listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. We know that the species, subspecies, has lost over one third of its historic range in Sri Lanka. However, when you do sketch out the range that we have, it still extend across climatic zones and elevational gradients within the country. We know from previous research also that habitat suitability for the leopard here is associated strongly with forest cover and with the level of protection of the landscape. This is just a list of the publications about leopards that have been done in Sri Lanka. It's, I know, dizzying, so don't look at it too carefully. But the main point here is that most of the work has been done within protected areas. And only now are we starting to get some idea of what's happening outside of the protected landscape. So that's the focus of our work at the moment, is to try and ensure unprotected landscapes get the due attention. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Our story here started in 2016 when there were 10 leopards that were killed in the Central Highlands region of Sri Lanka. Now, our organization has been working here since 2001, and we realized at this point that we had very little information about this population here in this unprotected landscape. A very brief background about the Central Highlands. You can see from the map there, the southern central section of the country. It extends about 2,500 square kilometers, reaches up to about 2,500 meters in elevation. It's a World Heritage Site, basically because of its high levels of biodiversity as well as species endemism. When you zoom in a little more closely, you can see that this is a very highly fragmented landscape. There's few key remaining forest patches, and there's very few protected areas. You can see the light green image there is Horton Plains National Park. That's the only national park within the Central Highlands region. The area that we're focusing in on today is here, which is the classic tea estate landscape of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's Ceylon tea comes from this area, and it's dominated by vast fields of tea cultivation. So the goals of our project when we came up here in 2016 was to understand basic leopard ecology and behavior. We know their animals are being killed up here. We know from planters that there are animals up here. We don't know how many. We don't know where they are, how they're using the space, whether this is a sink population that's coming from the protected areas surrounding, or the forests surrounding. We don't know what they're eating, what the threats are. And we also want to understand how to foster human-leopard coexistence in this, again, unprotected landscape. So initially, when we went, what we first of all did, we went to the southern section of the highlands, which is dominated by these 2 large hydroelectric reservoirs, the Mausakeli Reservoir and the Castlereagh Reservoir. And we initially set up a remote camera array to try and understand what was happening on this landscape. And quite quickly, we started getting information, as you would expect. Well, we didn't actually know what to expect. We weren't sure if we were going to get any animals or going to have all our cameras stolen or not. But what happened is this was the first individual we got. This guy's name is Arnold, we called him. He was a young adult male at the time. And we started to pick him up at different locations on the landscape, using the edges of the T, using the central areas, using the landscape quite widely. We started to get a bit of a picture of what he's doing. Of course, he wasn't the only male that there was. There was a number of adult males that were in that region, and they were setting themselves up, as you would expect from leopards, neighboring each other for the most part. So we're starting now to get a bit of a picture of what's happening on this landscape. In the next year, we expanded the remote camera survey down to the southeast, where you see the yellow circles, to the Bogo Antalawa Valley. And now when we look at the accumulation of both of these locations in respect to adult female leopards, so obviously the breeding population, we saw some interesting patterns. One was that these animals were all being detected up near the edges of the forest, the dark green areas, or else on this ridgeline that runs in between the Mausakeli and the Castlereagh reservoirs that I showed you earlier. And very little was happening in terms of females down in the lower valley areas where the T dominates. So we quite quickly realized that these upper ridgelines were actually acting as refuges for this population. Looking more closely at this ridgeline, it's an 18-kilometer long ridge that goes between 2 existing protected areas, a forest reserve and a sanctuary. The first thing we did is we basically mapped out areas of non-tea, areas where there's forest patches, where there's eucalyptus and pinus plantation, where there's released tea. Basically, what it formed is a sort of stepping stone pattern, which wildlife can use to move across. Then, using those as the boundaries, we started working with the land holders, the people that are working and owning that land, which was 13 different tea estates belonging to 4 regional plantation companies, private estates, some hotel owners as well. After long consultations with them, we successfully were able to sign a memorandum of understanding to collaboratively work toward protecting this ridgeline in the long term, which we called the Peak Ridge Forest Corridor. We quickly, while the iron was hot, we quickly took the same methodology up to the next ridgeline along, which is to the northeast, which is called the Elbeda Ridge. This is quite a different system. It's one plantation company which owns all 7 of the estates that are in this area. It's a smaller ridge. And so things happened a little more quickly. Plus, we already had an existing template of how to go about this process. So in April 2023, we signed an agreement with with that company for the Elbeda Ridge Corridor, again, for protection of this ridgeline. So that's nice on paper, but what does that mean? So we end up with these 2 protected areas, the Peak Ridge Forest Corridor down in the red, and then the Elbeda Ridge Corridor in the yellow with the purple circles. These are all our partners down at the bottom of that image. Like I said, this is nice to look at on a map, but how does it work in reality? So the Corridors for Conservation Initiative sort of envisions 5 main goals. One, obviously, is leopard conservation. The second one is wider biodiversity conservation. As I mentioned, the central highlands of Sri Lanka are very biodiverse, and the leopard is a useful umbrella species because of its wide-ranging habitat needs, its wide-ranging range, and also its crossing habitats. So all of the smaller, more spatially restricted species that fall under the leopard's ecological umbrella, it's potential to conserve those also. A third goal is to try and improve habitat suitability because this is a very denuded and degraded landscape in terms of wildlife habitat. So a goal is to try and increase and improve this habitat for leopards and other wildlife as well. And of course, this is a working agricultural landscape, and there are villages throughout this landscape widely spread because mostly dependent upon the tea estates themselves for their livelihoods. So it's important to engage the local community and work together to try and undertake this long-term conservation. Finally, we wanted to use this as an example of kind of a citizen-led conservation initiative. Instead of waiting for the government to act, where there's a lot of protected areas in Sri Lanka, they're doing a lot of things from the government side, but this is an example of trying individuals, organizations, private companies working together to try and, in advance, take the lead in this conservation initiative. So if I quickly go through some of those goals. The first goal, leopard conservation. So our role as an organization is to kind of monitor in the long term the ridge population, get a better understanding of the ecology behavior of the leopards that are there, and then use this to try and further the conservation to ensure human wildlife coexistence on that landscape. So we're already getting a lot of quite interesting information. This is just an example of the activity times that we see between the unprotected tea landscape, which is the blue dotted line, and then a couple of big protected areas where we've also done remote camera surveys in Wilpatu National Park in the lowland dry zone, and Galoya National Park, which is in the lowland dry zone and the intermediate zone. And in both places, you can see a big difference between the unprotected tea is that during the day, between about 6 and 1800 hours, there's very, very little activity on the tea estate landscape where there's a lot of people. Right, this is something that you see in other wildlife populations as well. And then there's a big spike. As soon as night falls at basically 1800 hours, you get a huge spike in activity on this landscape. So what we're seeing is basically temporal partitioning with leopards and humans. Humans are using the landscape, the same spatial areas in the daytime, and the leopards are using those same locations at night. And we get these kind of images a lot where there's not much difference if you look at the times there between when this guy's walking in the day and when the leopard comes out in the night. Which also means that if people are starting to use this landscape in the night or using it in the night, they increase the chances that they will encounter leopards here. So that's also sort of some of the information, particularly at this 1900 hour time. that we use to communicate to communities and to estate owners to try and ensure that we minimize human-leopard interactions and conflicts. So again, these are just more examples where there's a 20-minute difference between these two images here, another half an hour difference between these two images here, with one in the late evening and one in the early night. So that's an interesting behavioral adaptation that leopards are using here. Now the next one we're also seeing is a lot of let me just get this video going here. So obviously leopards are solitary species, but they're part of a social network. And in this landscape, we don't hear vocal communications very often, but we do see obviously a lot of evidence of marking, scent marking, straight marking. So this is an resident adult male in a small forest patch, and he's marking his area. Going off. This is on March 10th of this year. And now if we look, in the following few weeks, we have one of the young resident females up on the top left, followed by another older resident female who's got a couple of cubs already. She's in the middle there. And then our initial fellow comes back here on the 25th. A few days later, a different male is there, then our fellow again. So we're seeing basically 4 different animals coming within the course of a month. And all kind of all marking on the scent marking, smelling, and they didn't all mark. That young male didn't, because I think he's new to the area. He's new to us anyway. And so this ends the month. This ends the month almost exactly a month after he was there to begin with. This is our same resident fellow who's going to also give a small straight mark there just to further define his territory. So again, we're just learning more about how these animals are using this highly fragmented landscape. So obviously they're resident animals, they're marking, they're doing all this. We've seen them over long times. We do have long-term residency as well. So this is an adult female OC who we've been tracking for over 8 years in this tea landscape. She's had at least six litters here. And this is an adult male Aussie who, again, similarly, we've tracked for 8 years. Sadly, he was killed in a snare in December 2024, about a week after that last photo on the right was taken. But it does show that these animals it's not a sink. These are animals that are here for a long time, and we're seeing this repeatedly. Obviously, like I mentioned, cubs, there is reproduction happening in this landscape. We are seeing a lot of cubs, and we are seeing some recruitment. We don't have full numbers because we're using remote cameras, and so it's difficult to get exact numbers for recruitment. But we are seeing, a lot of examples where we've had animals that are cubs on the landscape, and then a little bit later on, they're having their own cubs, like we see here. This is Nelly. Then we have another individual on the bottom left there. He's a young cub born on the Peak Ridge Forest Corridor. And subsequently, he moved over and established himself as an adult resident male on the next corridor over, only about 10 kilometers away, which is where he still is. And he doesn't show up anymore on the Peak Ridge Forest Corridor. He's only on the Alberta Ridge. But again, we're starting to get a lot more insights into how the animals are using this landscape. A key element for us was looking at diet. What are the animals eating? Because this is, like I said, unprotected land. There are people's biggest complaint is that their dogs go missing. There are some livestock on the land. So we analyzed over 100 scat samples. We have a student who's hoping to put this out as a publication soon. And we were happy to see that basically 85% of the diet at the moment is natural prey, mostly small to medium-sized animals in terms of frequency, in terms of the numbers. Dogs do come into play. They are eaten. There's less than 10% of the diet, but they do feature there. And that is the biggest source, like I said, of potential conflict or on this landscape. And as we would expect with leopards, it's quite a wide-ranging diet, which includes a lot of different species. That's backed up with what we see when we get these camera images. Mostly wild species are being taken, but the middle photo on the bottom there is a leopard taking a dog. This one I'll just play for you without making too much noise because it has its own soundtrack here. Oh, wait, let's go back here. Where are we? Okay, yeah. What happened there? Yo. Sorry, technical issues. And then get back to where we were. Okay. So the reason for showing that, other than it's a cute little clip, is the fact that this is a mother with two small cubs. This is the same mother, one of the rare daytime observations that we have, where she's going off at about 12 o'clock in the afternoon suddenly, and then coming back 40 minutes later with her prey, which is clearly a dog. This is the time when these females have these smallish cubs that we tend to see a spike in dog predation. So it seems like these females are taking these dogs back to their cubs and feeding on them. We don't have hard data for it. We need to get more information about that, but that's another piece of information that we can pass on to community members that are living in the area, that when there are small cubs there that we're picking up on the cameras, that be aware of your dogs, because we do seem to see these spikes. Like I said, it needs to be verified. The second prong of the project is biodiversity conservation. This is an ongoing project, so we're monitoring mammals, birds, butterflies, amphibians, reptiles, and we are getting quite a number of endemic and endangered threatened species, including the pangolin down there, spotted thrush, Indian fritillary butterfly, lots of different amphibian species. So this is an ongoing thing that we're sharing also with the tea estate companies, because they're also, a goal of theirs is Rainforest Alliance certification and trying to certify themselves. And so this kind of protection of the landscape is helpful for that. The third prong was trying to improve habitat suitability. So again, this, like I said, is a very denuded landscape. It was almost completely cleared for teak back in the day. Now there is more released tea and there's a bit more habitat for wildlife. But as you can see, this is an aerial shot of the top part of one section of the ridge. And you can see how thin the forest cover is in some of these areas. So the white color areas are places that we've identified as potential places for reforestation. And we're in the process actually of doing that, where we've built some nurseries. We've got some native tree species that we've either sourced from the wild or some that we actually are getting from the forest department now. They're starting to get some. We grow them up, and then of course the next stage is to replant these and try to get them to make a foothold into this landscape and improve the habitat quality for leopards and for wider biodiversity. Another goal of this is to increase the water retention during the dry season. This is an important watershed with those two reservoirs, and people, even though it gets a lot of rain in the wet season, in the dry season, people have a lot of problems with water. So improving forest cover is also effective for that. The fourth point was trying to engage local communities. So we need to do a couple of things. Obviously, snaring is a big issue on this landscape. People put snares for wild boar and for deer. They do obviously catch things indiscriminately, including leopards, and that's the biggest threat to leopards on this landscape. There is some poisoning that happens, but snaring is by far the biggest threat. So we try to educate people and raise awareness also about the fact that leopards are not to be feared. There's very few human incidents on this landscape. Leopards are actively trying to avoid that. And so what we do is a lot of awareness projects with community members, with school children, art competitions, mural painting competitions. We create and put out pamphlets that try to emphasize the importance of not putting snares, those kind of things. So this is, again, these are all long-term parts of the project that we work together with the estate companies and other stakeholders on doing. So then the final element here is to try and replicate this. So as you can see, this is the broader Central Highlands landscape. The green color is kind of conservation type areas, mostly not strongly protected. Our corridors are down there in yellow and red, and the white color is areas that we've identified as potential other corridors, and we're actually in the process now of putting remote cameras and starting to get the information that is required to see if these are going to be also viable corridors to increase the overall connectivity of this fragile, threatened, and highly important landscape. So that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Andrew, for a captivating talk. We would now like to invite some questions for Dr. Andrew. Already there are three questions for you. The first question is from Mr. Soumitra Dasgupta. Dr. Andrew, thanks for the wonderful presentation. What is the extent of human-leopard conflict in Sri Lanka and the ways adopted to mitigate?
Okay. So actually, Sri Lanka is in a way fortunate in that it doesn't have a high level of human-leopard conflict. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is that it's a predominantly Buddhist country, and there is actually a conservation ethic that kind of runs through where people are used to sharing space with wildlife. It's not just leopards. We have 7,000 elephants on this landscape, and there are big elephant-human conflict issues in the landscape. But still, people are willing to share space in some ways. Having said that, we do have snaring is a big issue in the Central Highlands. We do have a lot of animals that do get caught every year. It's about 8 to 10 get caught, which might not seem like a big number depending on where you're from, but with fewer than 1,000 animals, it's not insignificant. In the lowland dry zone, we have poisoning more where leopards go for livestock. There's larger livestock, and a lot of them graze within the boundaries and borders of protected areas. And so they do get taken sometimes by leopards. We did some surveys actually in the buffer zone of Yala National Park, where this is perceived to be a big issue. It turned out to be actually only the fourth largest issue for cattle herders after theft, cattle wandering off, diseases, and then leopard predation. So it is an issue, and sometimes the herders will poison the livestock as retaliatory killing. The problem is we don't know the extent of that, because in the highlands, we get information. We find out about the animals that get snared because of the system up there. Whereas down in the dry zone, if animals get poisoned or killed, it's very unlikely that you're going to find out about it. So we don't have a good handle on the extent of leopard deaths at human hands in those regions.
Yeah, there's a question from Dr. Sahir Khan. Great initiative and a wonderful presentation. What is the diet of Sri Lankan leopards in Central Highlands, and how does it influence the human-leopard conflict? And how local communities perceive this leopard presence in the area?
Thank you. That's a good question. So that was what we were interested in with our diet analysis. And so what we do see is a predominantly wild diet. These leopards are eating 85% natural prey. Thankfully, there is sufficient at the moment natural prey. The biggest issue is taking dogs. They do come, like we showed you in that video. They go to village areas and they do take dogs, and this sticks in people's memories. So it's perceived as being possibly a larger issue than maybe it is, but that the perception is what's important. So we have to address that. And as a result of that, people do see leopard as a threat. They also see it, they're also afraid. There is a fear factor there. So despite the fact that leopards in Sri Lanka almost nobody has ever been killed by a leopard, and there are vanishingly few even negative interactions, most of which are kind of defensive injuries. If a leopard gets surprised at a kill, maybe once every couple of years that might happen. People still view the leopard with fear. So if they see a leopard around their area, even though they know they're in the area, if they see it, then it becomes a bit of an issue and they maybe want that animal moved or want something done about it. So that's part of what we try to do with our education and awareness programs, is to try and reduce that fear factor as much as possible.
Great. There is a question from Dr. Arvind. Andrew, what method you use to identify the leopard's prey? Is it genetic analysis?
No, it wasn't. It was just straight up scat analysis. So looking at the hair remains of the prey in scat. So we had over 100 scat samples and basically washed and cleaned them and looked under the microscope to see what the hair was.
Yeah, there's a question from Dr. Sapnil. A brilliant work on field, a good example of scientific aspects with establishing the importance of coexistence. Since you are working for a long time in the area, I would like to know if any study is done on the dispersal of subadult cubs.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, there's been no specific study. I mean, Sri Lanka is not particularly keen on using radio collars and things. So we're limited a lot to the remote cameras that we use. So this is why we do pick up information, like I even showed there with a subadult that moves off and we find it somewhere else, but it's very hit and miss. There's a lot of animals that disappear from our study area, and where they end up, we don't know. So that's something that would be very, very interesting to know. We need to know more about connections between this highland population and the lowlands. We need to know more about the success of how many animals are being recruited into the population. So we only know about the areas we have cameras, and wherever we don't have cameras, we're we're shooting in the dark a little bit. So there's a lot more still to find out for sure.
Yeah. There is a question from Aliana. Great presentation with photos. Thank you. Do you know the genetic status of the populations there as well as inbreeding, etc.?
Again, there hasn't been a lot done. There's starting to be some work done. There are some signs of inbreeding, not within this population so much actually, but within even some of the national parks in Sri Lanka, in both Wilpattu and Yala. Things like the kink tails and the slightly hunched backs and things, which you do show up now and then, but there's actually a plan to do some genetic analysis, which is in the process right now. We tried to do some with SCAT as a non-invasive technique, but we're unsuccessful with getting the sufficient samples. Another slight complication is there are animals that get moved around the landscape. So you get captured in a snare in the highlands and then released in the lowlands somewhere else later on. Or the cubs that are left abandoned, they get raised and left and released in the lowlands somewhere else. So there's a few little questions like that as well. But there is some beginning of genetic analysis, which will hopefully start to answer at least some of these connectivity questions.
Yeah. And there is a last question from Aliana. Also, with seeing so much predation on dogs, are you aware of or worried about any disease being transferred from the domestic dog population to leopard?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things. And we're actually in the process of trying to start up with the local vets here, the wildlife department vets, and also some other vets, trying to look more closely, not just at the dogs, but we actually there was a couple of leopards in the not too distant future that have had feline leukemia, which is passed from cat to cat. We haven't seen distemper or anything like that yet, but there are dogs even within the central parts of some of the protected areas in Sri, even some of the national parks in Sri Lanka. So in this area where they have about maybe 10% of their diet dogs, obviously it is a concern. So it's something that we want to look into more going forward for sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Andrew, for wonderful interaction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. We would now like to invite Dr. Arvind Villanto as our next speaker. Dr. Arvind has 20 years of experience in wildlife conservation and works closely with various civil society organizations and the Director General of Natural Resources and Ecosystem Conservation, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry of Indonesia, to find innovative solutions to improve the effectiveness of key wildlife and biodiversity management in the country. From 2003 to 2011, he worked for several rescue and rehabilitation centers where he was able to dedicate his professional career on rescuing, rehabilitating, and releasing confiscated and conflicted animals. In 2014, he served as a program coordinator for the forum Harimau Kita, which is example Indonesian Tiger Forum, before he co-founded Sintas Indonesia in 2018. For nearly 2 decades, he has consistently carried out individual service targeted on Javan leopard and fishing kite. He is a dedicated conservationist, well respected by conservation fellows, and the role model for younger generations in implementing efficient and effective conservation solutions. Over to you, Dr. Arvind.
Okay, thank you, sir. There's my voice good there?
Yeah, it's audible.
Okay, I'll just try to share my screen now. If you all got the screen? Yeah?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay. Okay, then. Good day, everyone. Thank you for the IBCA for inviting us to share our knowledge and experience. So, yeah, what we're trying to share is more about our collaborative action to conserve the Javan leopards, particularly in Java. That we hope maybe can be applicable to all conservation effort in your area. So let's get started. Yes, introduction. Maybe already know that the Javan leopard or the Panthera pardus malas is now being stated as an endangered species. we have likely 319 mature individual in the wild, and it also called that the Javan leopard as a distinct species from other leopard subspecies, maybe because the Javan leopard is believed being separated with the mainland leopard since the Pleistocene era. And I think that the what we have here and what Andrew have is common because we are a mainline leopard, which is not connected with the other subspecies leopard, which is I think that we have the same important leopard now. So before all the talk, I just want to share you about the Java because many time people didn't know about Java, but they know about Bali, which is just an island with the Bali. So this is Java island, which is actually have a very significant number of biodiversity, endemic one, also threatened one. It's also a paradise for agriculture. That's why Java is very become a good place where people want to have a farm and something like that to keep the food sources. And what has happened then that Java is known also as the most populated island in the world. So almost if you can see in the pictures, there's a graduating color, which is the darker is the area with the most populated human, and the light one is the most or green is the most less people. So with this kind of peop human distribution, we were thinking where the leopards and the other animal will live, right? So based on Wibison et al. 2018, we try to modeling the distribution of Java leopard based on the present data, and we identified there's like 29 suitable landscape across the Java. And if you can see, it was very isolated, and none of them. I mean, the patch is very small to hold a viable population of the Japan leopard actually. And by our study that we found there is at least only 5 landscape in Java, which is in the orange color, that can hold a viable population. Let's say the less over than 50 individual mature individual, and among the 29 suitable landscape, we have no data in 7 landscape. But actually, in the rest of the yellow, it's not all of the area we have quite good data. There's only like a present, maybe someone see the leopard or maybe conflict, which is not very good or robust data that we have. So we cannot do something or plan something for the leopard in that area. So this is the common threat for all the large carnivore, right? There's like a poaching and then habitat shifting or degradation or fragmentation, and then human leopard conflict. Also, most of the case we also connected with the climate change, which is also affected to the climates and make like a firestorm or flood or something, which is also can affect to the Javan leopard itself. But most of all, I want to share you about another thing that actually become a threat, because in Java a connection between human and wildlife is most likely become one of the thing that what do you call it affect to the conservation of Javan leopard and other species. If you want to see that by history, since the first time, since 19 something, people in Java already try to kill or hunt the Javan leopard and the Javan tiger. Mostly when there's a plantation expansion in Java, so people have to make a new place to make a farm. They cut the forest, but this is where the leopard and the tiger live. So the government that back then they want to take off the leopard and tiger because they think that it will uh, make their plan to make the farm is not really happening. And now we have a study from Adiasto et al. In 2007 until 2019. Almost 4 individual leopard was being caught, killed, or taken to the XC2 area because of conflict and other things. So the hunting of the leopard is still going since past time until now. And if I can also show you the condition in the part of area of Java is in the western part of Java. The pink polygon is like is a conservation area which is protected by the government, also managed to conserve the wildlife. But if you can see the yellow dot is the place where the Javan leopard exists. So the Javan leopard is not really I mean it's not really in the conservation area, but they're also roaming in the outside the conservation area, which is it become a homework for the government and people to conserve the Javan leopard, because if there's not in the conservation area, it also mean that there's no program there. So actually the conservation strategy is already being planned by the government and also by with their partners, NGO and academician. It's almost a common thing, right? That we want to reduce the threat in the current conditions. So we will have in the future that the leopard in the isolated habitat can be genetically improvement and also the population increase. But yet there's a kind of also a problem when we try to implementing it. Most likely Java is known as a island with, if I can say, it's like hopeless area to manage because the population is very high, and where the development of the country also centralized in Java. So it seems that less of funding attract to have a conservation program in Java. Sadly, a lot of big NGO, which is usually connected to the big funding, they have an office in Java. They have an office in Jakarta or Bogor, but only small program being done in Java. So it's like I don't know. It's like Java is underlooked, but actually they have Java have a lot of animal net being needed to conserve. So what we do at the first, that we try to connecting the dot. So when we don't have any NGO, any big NGO do something for the Javan leopard, what we're trying to do is building a voluntary network, voluntary based network, which is back then we're not doing a conservation or research program, but what we trying to do is just doing the leopard helping the government to help the leopard human leopard conflict mitigation, and also give them an technical assistance, whether doing camera trapping or occupancy survey, so the government and the academician can have more knowledge and more skill to have the leopard information in the wild. Because one of the things that Java is not really have a lot of study about the leopards is also lack of knowledge about the behavior, population, and most everything about the leopard back then. So the good thing is that since 2000, last year, 2024, we finally meet some partners that are really interesting with Javan leopard and really want to commit to help the conservation of Javan leopard. And then together we make a program what we call is Javan White Leopard Survey. It's basically a camera trap survey across the Java Island, which is comprising to 29 block survey, which is we identified as the habitat of Java leopards, and it also including 1,160 camera station, 4,064 kilometer square as study area, and hopefully there will be 104,000 trap days. What we do is placing a camera trap systematically using a robust design survey, and then we also collecting scat for the genetic analysis, and not only for the leopard to see the connection genetic diversity, but also we use the scat analysis for the prey analysis. So what we're trying to achieve with the program is the first, that we want to have the baseline data, because this is the most important thing before we can planning something for the Javan leopard. But not only Javan leopard, because we're using camera trap, as we know, also it can also have much information about the terrestrial biodiversity, even is from bycatch from the camera traps. And the second goals is we need more people to look after the Javan leopard. So the capacity building is the one thing that we need to do for the people who have passion and commitment to save the Javan leopard, not only for the government, for students, or even for the local people that we found or have any concern with the environment and the Javan leopard in Java. And then if we working together, then hopefully the government, private sector, and community can have a networking. They can talk each other. They can see what's happening. Then also they can plan something for the good of the Java Island. And work without a publication will be perish. So we also targeting to have like a popular and scientific publication, so everybody can see what were happening in Java, and hopefully if it match with the needed in other area, they can re-implementing it or just adjusting with the condition there. And the most important thing is the funding, actually. Yeah, because before I said that one of the things that become conservation in Java is not really work is because lack of funding that going to Java for the conservation. So until now, I think it's just 1 year we are doing the survey. From the 29 or 21 targeted landscape, we just completed in like a 7 landscape. And we now ongoing in 3 or 4 landscape to replace placing the camera trap, and the rest of the landscape will be done after this, and hopefully by the end of by the mid of 2026 we can complete it all the Javan White Leopard survey. And maybe because we are still ongoing, I cannot I haven't have any pleasure like what Andrew and previous speaker. For now we still managing the data. We cannot share it for now, but hopefully if we have the chance to join again next year, we can share all what we have from the Javan Wild Leopard survey to all of you guys. And finally, the collaborative action that we built now involving almost 40 institutions, not only the government, the national park, the forestry agency, also the private sector. We have like 8 private sector who supporting us for all the survey, and also from the local NGO, which is we already have people who can work, but sometimes a problem with the small NGO that they cannot reach the funding source because like an administration thing and something. But when we doing it together with Sintas as the hub for all the activities, all the small NGO, big NGO, we can work together to save the Javan leopard for the future. Because what we think that uh, as long as uh, you want or you willing to working together, it won't make you small or make your organization small. But we will have more or greater achievement to the goals that we plan together than what if we doing it by ourselves. I think that's thing that I can share for you now about the collaboration initiative that we did in Java. Thank you. Back to the moderator.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Arvind, for a very informative talk. Now, I would like to invite some questions for Dr. Arvind. Already there is a question from Shanaditya Saha. Is there a healthy population of melanistic leopards in Java?
Yeah, yeah. There's a five landscape which is have a good population density and also have a quite big area to hold a bigger population. So hopefully, with all the program that being done by the government and the partners, at least that five landscape can hold can also be good population for the Javan leopards.
Okay. So there is a question from my side. Do you plan this Java leopard survey to be a regular exercise at regular intervals, or is it a single time event?
Pardon?
Do you plan this survey to be a regular exercise at regular intervals, or will it be a one time exercise?
Yeah. Okay. Actually, we will plan it to repeat it the survey at on 5 years from now. What we're trying to do is now have the baseline of the data, and then next year, hopefully, we can develop the strategy and action that should be done in every landscape. So by then, like 2 or 3 years, we're doing the intervention what based on what we plan, and we're trying to monitoring again about the achievement of the intervention in the 4 or 5 years after now. But this is I mean this a global plan. But if the every landscape has their own resources or funding, they can do it as much as they want. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a one, it's basically a comment from Aliana. Very cool to see the melanistic leopard. You said that farming is very common there. Is it mainly crops or are there also livestock?
Yeah. There's also we have both. Mostly people that having farm, they also have livestock there, goat or chicken and also cow.
Right. And there's a compliment from Mr. Chakravarti. Thank you, Dr. Arvind, for the presentation. Uh, there is another question from Rishi Basumatarai. Do Javan leopard occur in palm oil cultivation? If so, how intense is the conflict?
Yeah. Actually, there's no a big palm oil plantation in Java. The huge plantation only exists in Sumatra and Kalimantan, but there's no in Java. The Java likely more likely for timber and also what do you call it? Yeah, there's no oil plantation. So and for the conflict, the thing is that because almost the same what Andrew said that people in Java uh, have a perception that it's a beast, it's the animal that to be feared. So many of them just by seeing the leopard, it become a conflict, you know. So because they fear they want the government or NGO to catch the leopard, but the leopard actually do nothing for them. The leopard just walking through the habitat to the place, but most people in Java have what do you call it? Uh, less less resilient with the leopard. So most likely the condition is people a small level of conflict, but they want to treat it as a high level conflict. So they want to catch the leopards.
And this is the last question. What might be from Paravita Basu? Thanks, Dr. Arvind. What might be your strategy of involving community in the conservation other than involving in scientific service but sustaining the dialogue?
Okay. Yeah. Because the main problem is that we not really know where the Javan leopard is. Sometimes if there's a conflict, that's the time that we know that there's Javan leopard there. So we yeah, the first step that we trying to do is we have the information, and then we can map the area and how the social culture there, and then what we can plan what need to be happen there. So the involvement of the local people and the local NGO in our survey also is one of the things that we trying to do to make people more aware, uh, to make people know what they have to do if they see leopard, and hopefully it will pass to one group to another group, so everybody in the near the forest area can uh, do the conservation and do protecting the leopards.
Thank you, Dr. Arvind, for nice introduction. Thank you very much. We
You're
would now
welcome.
like to invite Dr. Bilal Habib as the next speaker for today's webinar. Dr. Habib is a conservation biologist interested in the integration of quantitative and interdisciplinary approaches to conservation challenges. He is currently serving as a senior faculty at the Wildlife Institute of India. He worked as Wildlife Survey Program Manager for the Wildlife Conservation Society's Afghanistan Biodiversity Project and was involved in the design and coordination of wildlife surveys in the Wakhan corridor in the Pamis. His research species and system range from wolves in semi-arid and trans-Himalayan landscapes, leopards from the Himalayas to central India, dholes from low-density to high-density areas, Marco Polo sheep and snow leopard in the Afghan Pamis for understanding movement of large carnivores in a human-dominated landscape in response to Anthropocene. Over to you, Dr. Bilal.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and probably good evening at some of the places. It's really a pleasure to be there, part of the people speaking about the leopards, and I'll be talking about the leopards in India. And I think this photograph, which is there, reflects what are leopards, especially in our country. We have something around 14,000 leopards, which are inside protected areas of India. And we don't know how many we have beyond our protected areas. And this is one of the pictures which has been taken from the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, which is in the metros, which is one of the densest population in the world. And you have these 25, 27 leopards in that particular landscape. And you all know that India is a country of big cats. And still, leopard is one among them. And it's a conservation challenge species. And it's one of the species in our country which has a far greater challenge when we talk about the conservation. And we also call it's a species of conservation concern in our country because of its presence. And most of the people know about this, like we have something around 68 countries, 90 subspecies of leopards. And I will not go into the details of that, but I'll be mostly talking about what we have in our country and what we know that. And this is one of the leopard populations which we have recently concluded, and which is only these many leopards, something around 13,000 leopards. They overlap with the tigers, and probably we have far more leopards which are beyond these tiger landscapes. And one of the most interesting things which we have to consider when we talk about these leopards, which is within tiger reserves, we are becoming more and more successful in increasing the tiger numbers inside protected areas, and some of these leopards are going to be out in the human-dominated landscapes. So mostly I will be focusing about the conservation issues. We don't have much issues when we talk about leopards inside protected areas. When we talk about leopards within the protected areas or within the tiger reserve, we share their landscape with tigers, but we have a huge issue with the leopards which are outside protected areas. And this is a general biology or ecology about the leopards. I don't go into the details of too much, but on an average, we lose something around 500 leopards a year. And because of the leopards, we lose something around 100 people in our country. So the challenge, the management of the leopards, we have a land use changes happening outside protected areas, which results in the leopards going into the more human-dominated landscape. So we have an edge increasing between leopards and humans. And if we continue to allow that edge to increase, then probably we will have a far greater issues in managing those leopards. So we have a sugar canes, we have a change in agriculture landscapes. So how we are going to manage our leopards in human-dominated landscapes so that the boundary between these two, the leopards and the humans, is not going to increase in our country. And this is why leopards are in our country. You go to an agricultural area, you go to a field, you go anywhere, you're going to see leopards there. And these leopards are invisible. Now, this is just one of our study sites, and any type of agriculture field, starting from banana to sugarcane to grapes to anywhere in the landscape, you can see the leopards. And you can see during a daytime, the children of that village go to that particular place to play, and evening it's a leopard which comes to that particular place and looks over how it is going on. And other than leopards, we have other species there in that particular landscape. We have hyenas, we have jackals, and we have so many other species in that particular landscape. And this is what it is. It's the people working in that landscape. It's just a fraction that if you just take your eyes away from your kid, what's going to happen? Because they are there every time. They're watching you. It's that fraction, it's that mistake which will be there for the fraction of the seconds, and the human conflict will be there. Otherwise, they'll be there. They will be watching that individual, what's happening. So it's a very intricate balance. And if we allow these leopards to go in the human-dominated landscapes, to extend their areas in these sugarcane fields, and it's going to be a very tough for us to manage these leopards for a longer run. And this is what they do. They a lot of diet, a lot of natural diet. They take domestic cats, they take dogs. They're dependent on rodents. They take goats, they take sheep, because this particular area doesn't have too much of a natural prey. That's how they survive. And we know that it's one of the most adaptable species. So if the species is one of the most adaptable species, it's very difficult to manage that species in a human-dominated landscape, because the species can occupy and dominate in any type of the habitat it's going to go. And it's thriving in urban and peri-urban landscapes. So we are not talking about the leopards, which are in our protected areas, but we are talking about the leopards who are dominating in these urban and peri-urban landscapes. And we have a lot of studies going in talking about the states of the leopards. We have done 2018 and 22 inside the protected areas, which were left with the tigers. And we have a lot of studies going outside the human-dominated landscapes in other places. And I don't think there will be a day in our country where there will not be a news about the leopard. Okay, somewhere in the corner of the country, the leopard has done this, the leopard has done that, the leopards are in sugarcane fields. So it's everywhere in every news in our country. And it's not that humans are only losing their life. The leopards are also. I already informed that we are something losing 500 leopards a year because of the retaliation killing, because of the electrocution, poaching, road accidents, railway accidents. And these are all threats which our leopards are facing. And when we just put that, what are the major issues when we talk about leopards? It's the distribution, which is outside human-dominated landscapes, which is because of their adaptability. It's a habitat loss. It's a reduced prey base. It's a lack of the information on their ecology outside protected areas. We do a lot of translocations. Whenever there's a conflict, we just pick up these leopards from one place and place these leopards in other place, and we don't know what's happening. And probably there's a more and more conflict happening because of them. There's a poaching, there's a lack of information on sharing at the landscape levels, what's happening from one landscape to other landscape. So to understand that, this is one of the landscapes which is in one of the states in the central India. We call it something around 15 leopards in that particular landscape. And all of these leopards were conflicting animals. Okay, they were captured as a part of the conflict. And once they were radio collared, the only option was to remove them from that particular landscape and throw them somewhere else, some 20 kilometers, 100 kilometers. And what we realized is that after 1 month after their translocation, all of these leopards were back to the same place where they were captured. And most interesting is that after radio collaring, most of these leopards continue to use that particular landscape, but none of these were the conflicting individuals. So when we are trying to capture the animals from a conflicting zone, are we capturing the right individuals? So what we realized over the time, there are two different types of individuals in the landscape. There are individuals who are territorial, who have got an experience of living in this particular landscape and who has a home range of their own. And there are leopards who are dispersing, who are very young leopards, and they don't have their territories, and their movement is altogether different. And when these are the animals which are responsible for the conflict, and when you are trying to capture the leopards, you are probably capturing the leopards which are territorial. So you are removing a territorial individuals and leaving the territory vacant. And what's happening? You are giving other individuals, a younger individuals, a chance to live in that particular landscape. So this is entire human dominated landscape and agriculture belt. I don't think there's a small area where the leopards is not going. Everywhere there are leopards. But if you look at the home ranges, these are the tracks of the leopards, the real-time movement of the leopards, but these are the 50% home range. So they have an amazing strategy. During daytime, they just use very small areas, just 2, 3, just a sugarcane field is more than enough. But during nighttime, they exploit far greater landscapes in that particular landscapes in search of a prey and in search of looking for the mates and other in that particular landscape. So I will just talk about the incident which happened in the month of May and June. There's a conflict. We lost 4 young boys and 10 leopards were captured. Within 6 months, we started with a camera trapping. We thought, what's going to happen? 10 leopards were captured as a part of a conflict, and within 6 months, 6 new individuals, and within 3 months, 14 new individuals occupied that particular landscape. So you removed 10, but you allowed 14 leopards to get a territory. And when you allow the 14 leopards to get a territory, most of these young leopards, these new leopards, they're young leopards, they would have got territories when they were something around 4 to 5 years of age. By the time they would have realized how to live in a human-dominated landscape, they would have more experienced individuals to navigate, to understand human-dominated landscapes. But because of our removal, we are giving them territories at very early stages of their life, probably 2.5 years. So what you are allowing, because of our removal experiments, you are allowing the younger leopards to occupy the territories in a human-dominated landscapes. And these younger leopards doesn't have so much of an experience to live in that particular landscapes, which actually results in more and more a conflict. So what we are thinking based on this particular study, we are thinking what we have to do. If you have to manage the conflict in human-dominated landscapes, what we are thinking about, that increase the tenureship of the leopards. So your leopards who are there in that particular landscape should have a longer tenureship. When these leopards will have a longer tenureship, probably the level of conflict is going to decrease. And if we are able to manage the reproductive potential of those, if there's a less turnover, higher turnover is to be reduced and higher growth rate is to be reduced, then probably we can manage these populations to a limit that they are acceptable. We are not removing them from these particular landscapes. And there's a lot of deterrents, and not only for leopards, for many other species. And we are using these deterrents from last 10 to 15 years. And in these last 10 to 15 years, whatever deterrents we have used to manage the conflict, we have not managed. And none of these things were, you may see a lot of presentations, people talking about we have put a light, and then put a camera trap below that light, and leopard comes and runs away from that particular village. And probably you will probably think that, okay, you see the leopard has gone out of that particular village, but nobody knows that that leopard is going to the other village. So you are removing a problem from one village, but you are forcing that leopard to go to some other village. So these are not the solutions which we do. Probably we have to try to understand what is happening at the ecological level, what's happening at the local ecological scale, how these animals are behaving and what's happening with them, to take those decisions which are very critical for managing these animals in that particular landscape. And we have, very interestingly, and when we started this particular project, one of the objectives which I put was to study the diet, to collect the scats. After 5 years of research, one of my students returned back. He said that no scats. He was unable to find a scat. I said that, how is it possible? And he said that it's impossible to enter a sugarcane field. Even if there is not a collared leopard, you don't know how many other leopards are in that sugarcane field, and most of the scats are in sugarcane fields. So you can't take that much of a risk to get a scats. So we got something around 40, 50 scats. So we're interested in knowing what's happening. So we got, last year, we got a camera collars on these animals. So it's a radio collar with a camera. So we tried to look how these animals live in this human dominated landscape and try to see the landscape through the eyes of the leopards. So I'll be just showing you a 1 minute video from a cam collar. So that's the story of the leopards which are outside protected areas of India, and probably we will have something around 40 to 50, 40% of the leopards which live outside protected areas, and they are responsible for most of the conflict which we have the leopards, and that's probably what we have to think and think how we are going to manage these leopards in the coming years. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Bilal, for a captivating talk. I would now like to invite some questions for Dr. Bilal. There is a question from Vaishnavi Karale Patil, who asks, don't you think that trophy hunting is still one of the main threats to leopard? Even if it is banned, it is still carried out in many regions.
So you can't call it a trophy hunting, because whenever you see a trophy hunting, it is probably some other thing people take. So it's an illegal hunting and poaching. It's not, I don't suspect that in our country that's going to be a threat right now, but there are other reasons because of which we lose a lot of animals. We will lose a lot of animals to electrocution, we lose a lot of animals to retaliatory killings, and we lose a lot of animals because of the road and railway accidents. I think they are much bigger threats than the trophy hunting in our country as of now.
Yeah. There is a second question from Dr. Igor. Is there a minimum distance to translocate leopards to be sure that they do not return?
I think so. Our distance have ranged from 20 kilometers to 200 kilometers. So I think they all return back, and it depends upon at what age that animal is captured. So if it's an animal which is 2 years of age and he's in a conflict and you capture and relocate that animal, probably that's a dispersing animal. Then probably you are just taking that animal from one place to other place. There's a less chance of that animal coming back because you're just aiding in dispersal. But if you are removing a 3 and a 4 year or a 5 year leopard from a landscape, it's a territorial animal. Probably it has been in that territory from last 4 to 5 years, and 100% that leopard is going to come back because it's a homing instinct, and he's a territorial. He knows that I have a home, I have to go back. And even if you take that leopard even 200 kilometers away, it's going to come back.
Yeah.
Like
There
we
is
have in examples in India where leopards have returned back from 300 kilometers, 200 kilometers.
Yes. So there is a question from Shiladitya Saha. So not like situation in Borivali where we have a national park. In North Bengal, leopard population is increasing around city. Do we need proper waste management for that?
So it's not about waste management. See, what is the most important thing for a leopards to increase in human dominated landscapes? First is the shelter, then is the food, because shelter is most critical part of the leopards when we talk about the human dominated landscapes. And the shelter should have a bit of a water presence of a water. So if you have those areas which can shelter these leopards during daytime, there is no scarcity of food for the leopards in human dominated landscapes. In India, we have a lot of dogs. We have a lot of other food items available to these leopards. So if we have to manage these leopards, yes, you can think about these waste management, but there is many other things which are responsible for the leopards. So there's a much bigger issue than just talking about the waste management.
Yeah. And there's a last question. Can you discuss from Dr. Sapnil? Can you discuss some experience from studies from Junnar regarding area use and dispersal of subadult leopards?
Luckily, we were not able to get any subadult leopard in Juna, but we got subadult leopards in other parts of the Maharashtra. So we did one in Tadoba and we did one in Chandrapur. And these leopards, they dispersed around 100 and 150 kilometers away from their parental home range areas, but not in Juna. Whatever animals we got in Juna, they were mostly the established individuals, not the young ones.
Yeah.
No,
And
it's like,
yeah,
yes,
I
I
think you
read
got
that
this.
question.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
distance 20 kilometers were connected. So we have a very interesting thing in this part of the country where the leopards are. It's a sugarcane field. And what is very interesting with the sugarcane, all the sugarcane is not cut at the same time. So sugarcane has a life cycle of 3 years. So in a one agriculture field, there will be a sugarcane for this year, and you may cut it next year, but you have a sugarcane in the other field which will be cut in the next year. So you always have some habitat for an animal to go from. And sugarcane is a very interesting crop. Once it's put, it's a zero maintenance. Nobody goes inside sugarcane. So it's always a habitat in a human-dominated landscape for these animals to go from one place to other place. Like I'll tell you a very interesting thing. The place where I did my wolf study as a part of my PhD, I thought in my life leopards will never go to that landscape. And after 16 years of my study, there's a leopard in that particular landscape, only because the sugarcane has got so much in the landscape that it allows those animals to reach to the places where we have never thought.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Bilal, for a wonderful interaction. I would now like to invite the last speaker for the today's webinar, Dr. Gareth Mann. Dr. Gareth Mann is director of Panthera's leopard program based in Cape Town, South Africa. He began working on leopards for his PhD research, which involved studying a low-density leopard population in the semi-arid mountains of the Little Karoo, South Africa. His groundbreaking research revealed the population's habitat preferences, population density, and diet, while also investigating how leopards are threatened by conflict with livestock farmers. In 2020, Gareth was selected to lead the Arabian Leopard Initiative, a joint venture between Panthera and the Royal Commission of Alula, aimed at conserving and restoring the critically endangered Arabian leopard in Saudi Arabia. His passion lies in using applied research to guide conservation policy and management, particularly when addressing the economic and social challenges of extending conservation activities beyond protected areas. Over to Dr. Gareth.
Thank you very much for that very kind and generous introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a privilege to be here with you all. And there's been really interesting talk so far. I hope that mine is also of interest to everyone. So I'm going to talk very briefly about the Arabian leopard, its current status, and the steps are being taken to try and pull it back from the brink of extinction. If we can get my slides change. So the Arabian leopard is critically endangered. It is, I think, the most endangered of the big cat species or subspecies. It's lost, over 98% of its historical range. It's probably close to 99%. And the wild population is thought to be fewer than 100 mature individuals. We know very little about the current status of Arabian leopard populations. The main stronghold is thought to be in southern Oman in the Dhofar Mountains. But even there haven't been too many detailed population surveys. It's thought that there are about 50 leopards in that population, but that was a genetic study done a few years ago. There's still lots to learn even about that population. We know that there are leopards in Yemen, but due to the political situation, the conflict there's been very little work done on those leopards either. And the other extant range state is Saudi Arabia, where the last leopard was recorded in 2014. So Panthera's involvement started on the Arabian leopard started in 2019 when we were approached by the Royal Commission for Al Ula, which is a Saudi government entity which has the national mandate for leopard management in Saudi Arabia. And they asked us to support their efforts in leopard conservation. So most of what I'm going to talk about today is in the Saudi context, because that is where the majority of sort of recent work has been going on, but I will touch on the other range states as well. So how did Arabian leopards come to be in such dire straits? It's the same drivers as across most of their range. Persecution due to human-wildlife conflicts. There's also a strong culture of hunting in many of the Arabian countries. And that's been coupled with habitat loss, prey depletion, and this has all been kind of underscored by a lack of data. We have, as I say, there's been, I think, one camera trap study of the Oman leopard population. There have been some genetic studies done. There have been 2 Arabian leopards collared, both in Oman. That's about the extent of the data that we have on Arabian leopards. And there have been a number of papers published based on historical sightings, but very little contemporary data. And that, coupled with the very rugged terrain in which Arabian leopards are present, means that it's been possible for them to kind of slide into this situation without people really noticing it. They were always quite rare in this landscape. I think it's naturally a very low density population. It's a very arid, harsh environment. The animals are likely to have very big home ranges, and so they can easily disappear from a landscape without anybody really noticing. And unfortunately, although there have been conservation plans drawn up, there was a national action plan for Saudi Arabia that was drawn up in the late 2000s. Similarly, there's a range-wide strategy for Arabian leopard conservation drawn up in about 2006, 2007. The trigger for action in both of those was the discovery of extant leopard populations. And if you didn't actually find leopard populations, there was very little that was due to be done as detailed in those plans. The assumption was that leopards were around and that it was just a matter of time before we found them. But because there were no discoveries of new Arabian leopard populations during that time, there wasn't a lot of active conservation action until the late 2010s. So our first steps when trying to work on the Arabian leopards, trying to figure out where they could still be. So we undertook some habitat modeling. We actually had to base this exercise on data from leopards elsewhere. We actually used data from leopards in the mountainous region of South Africa, which is also fairly arid, and we thought there were likely to be some ecological similarities. We then validated those data against the data from the 2 leopards that were collared in Oman and found that the model worked really well. And we initially produced a model for Saudi Arabia and then more recently expanded that to the whole of historic leopard range in Arabia. And what we found was quite interesting. As I said, the main stronghold is thought to be Oman, but this suggests that Oman is actually sort of on the fringes of Arabian leopard habitats, and that the most important range state is actually Yemen. And that's seems to be the key area for the long-term survival of the species. However, there also seems to be quite a bit of habitat in Saudi Arabia as well. And there's also there is a fair amount of habitat in Oman, and that is where we definitely have the extant leopard populations. So having decided or got some indication of where leopards were likely to be, we then went looking for them. We ran surveys from 2020 to late 2022. The survey was pretty extensive. We covered an area of over 5,500 square kilometers, recorded a fair amount of wildlife captures, including lots of other carnivores. So striped hyenas, Arabian wolves, caracal, all reasonably common, particularly in the mountains in southern Saudi Arabia, but we did not record any leopards. Now, obviously, camera traps, it does require quite an intensive effort. So we complemented that by doing questionnaire surveys. And these were very simple, just asking people if they had asking them to identify leopards, and then asking had they seen them in the area in which they lived within the past year or the past 5, 10, 20 years. We divided the range into 20 by 20 kilometer grid cells, we identified about 109, which we thought were the most likely to have leopard presence. Tried to interview between 5 and 10 people within each grid cell, but again, there was no real strong evidence of leopard presence. A couple of isolated claims of seeing leopards, but these weren't verified by anybody else in the area. And they were often quite poor quality sightings at night or in the rain. Nothing that strongly suggested that leopards were still present. So obviously this is a pretty negative outcome, because Saudi Arabia is the one country apart from Oman where there is a lot of scope for Arabian leopard recovery, but it has in some ways been a positive in that it has given us quite clear a sense of purpose going forward. So it's not to say that there are no leopards left in Saudi Arabia. There has been some evidence of leopards very close to the Yemen border, which could just be transient individuals crossing over the border. But it does seem very likely that there's no actual viable leopard population in Saudi Arabia that's self-sustaining, that's breeding. And so that means that we will have to be reliant on ex situ conservation measures such as captive breeding, and there has been a lot of investment in this. There was the main captive population has been in the breeding center for endangered Arabian wildlife in Sharjah in the UAE, but there was also a captive population in Taif in Saudi Arabia, and that has increased substantially over the past few years. It's gone from about 19 individuals to over 30. And there are new facilities planned, which the Royal Commission for Al Ula are planning to develop in northern Saudi Arabia. And they're hoping to get the population up to the point where they can reintroduce leopards into the Al Ula region in northwest Saudi Arabia in 2030. So that is the aim that we're working for, but as I say, the fact that we haven't been able to find these populations has just illustrated that we do need to be more proactive in trying to look at other ways of bolstering the population. We cannot solely rely on in situ conservation methods. So, of course, it's not just about breeding leopards. There's a lot of work required to actually ensure that they have a decent shot of survival in the wild. And so we've been doing a lot of work with the Royal Commission of Al Ula at the potential reintroduction sites. They have been doing a lot of habitat restoration work, so planting trees, trying to improve the grazing management of these areas, which have often been severely degraded through overgrazing. There's also been a lot of reintroduction of wild prey, which has been severely depleted in many of these areas. And there's also a lot of community engagement. We have to acknowledge that these leopards are going to be wide-ranging. They're certainly not going to remain within the protected areas into which they are released. And so we have to sensitize the local communities. We have to get buy-in from them because they have the potential to make or break this entire project. And they haven't lived with leopards in most cases for many decades, if not within living memory. So they're not used to having leopards in the landscape, although they do have other large carnivores present in the form of Arabian wolves. There's also been some sort of broad-scale conservation planning measures. The IUCN Red List assessment for Arabian leopards was recently revised last year. We've also just done an IUCN Green Species status for Arabian leopards. That was published a few weeks ago. The National Action Plan for Saudi Arabia was recently revised to take account of the sort of updated knowledge of the species. And then last year, there was a meeting to update the regional conservation strategy for Arabian leopards, which seeks to combine the efforts of all of the range states into a unified set of actions. And some of the cooperation that's come out of that have been trying to get some kind of an idea of the status of these populations in Yemen. And that's involved, the plan is to train up Yemeni scientists, provide them with the equipment that they need to run the surveys, and then to try and get data from those areas which they can safely access. And there's also planned cooperation between the various captive breeding facilities with the exchange of individuals between the breeding facilities to increase the genetic diversity present within those captive populations. So the situation is extremely grim at the moment. However, there are some positive steps being taken to try to recover the population. It's a very ambitious plan, but there is also a huge amount of effort going into it and a lot of resources being put in by the range states, in particular Saudi Arabia. And so there is some grounds for optimism that we can pull the species back from the brink. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gareth, for a wonderful talk. There are some questions for you. First is from Siladitya Shah. What was the last historical data that shows population of Arabian leopard in Saudi?
So the last record that we have for any leopard in Saudi Arabia is 2014. That's the last confirmed sighting. There have been, as I said, there have been some scrapes detected close to the Yemen border, but in terms of an actual population, we're probably going back probably over 20 years. It's certainly, I think, the last actual. So the leopard in 2014 had been poisoned. They just found the carcass. The last actual sighting of a live leopard, I think, is 2001. So it has been a long time.
Great. So there is a question from Aliana. Great to hear from you today, Gareth. Are there any plans for expanding existing or creating new protected areas to help link suitable habitats in Saudi or between Saudi and Yemen?
So yes, there are. So Saudi Arabia is fully committed to the 30 by 30 initiative, and they have declared some massive protected areas, particularly in the northern parts of the country. In the south, there are also, as far as I know, new protected areas planned. The challenge is that the southwestern area is also the most mesic part of the country. It's a little bit, I mean, I use the term lightly, it's a little bit greener. And the mountain areas that the leopards like are also favored by people because there's a bit more rainfall. It's a little bit cooler there. So there's a very direct competition between leopards and people for habitat, which is not the case in many other parts of the world. And so there are plans to develop new protected areas there, but it is going to be a lot more challenging because the southern areas are a lot more densely settled than the north. And yeah, we hope the plan is to hopefully do the initial reintroductions in the north, but then also hopefully in future to have reintroductions in the south as well. At the moment, those two areas are not linked, so we can't really we can't treat them as a single population at the moment.
Thank you. There is a question from Dr. Igor. Is there a diet and prey-based analysis of the Arabian leopard? What is available in the wild and what should be reintroduced? And what is the local people's attitude to possible leopard reintroduction?
So there's not a lot known about diets. The data from Oman suggests that it's largely the sort of smaller things like hyrax, ibex, etc., that the leopards prey upon. What we found in our surveys in Saudi Arabia was that although there was quite a healthy population of the other large carnivores, we found very few wild prey. Very few ibex and gazelle. So there's been quite a lot of reintroduction of those species. There's also, I think, hyrax are another potential important food source for leopards. And those are also quite depleted, largely due to targeted hunting. As I say, sport hunting is quite a popular pastime in Saudi Arabia, and even though it's illegal and carries very heavy fines, it still seems to be quite a widespread practice, unfortunately. There will have to be a lot of prey reintroduction, but at the moment the most likely prey source for leopards would be livestock, which you obviously want to avoid. In terms of the local people, there's a lot of work to be done to sensitize them. There's a lot of concern about it, about leopards being reintroduced. As I say, people haven't lived with leopards for a long time. And so there is a lot of concern about the potential risk to human safety. And the Arabian leopards are very small. The males are only, I think, about 35 kilograms or so. So they're a relatively small subspecies. They are unlikely to pose much of a threat to human safety. But there's a lot of work to be done in getting the message out about that. And also helping people to better protect their livestock from leopards when they are reintroduced, which is, I think, a very valid concern.
Thank you, Dr. Garrett. There's the last question from my side. How are you planning to address the threats which were originally responsible for local extinction of leopards, particularly in terms of protection?
Yes, so that has been a major part of the site preparation work. There's been a lot of investments in the protection of these areas, and there's still a long way to go, but a lot of rangers have been employed, a lot of work done to implement systems like SMART and Earth Ranger. Obviously, in terms of the conflict, we're working a lot with the communities to build up tolerance there, and to try to reduce the use of things like poison, which are totally indiscriminate and still seems to be used quite a bit to deal with wolves. Obviously, it also poses a massive threat to leopards as well. So yes, and obviously the hunting as well. There has already been quite a bit of legislative change around making it illegal, introducing these incredibly stiff fines for hunting of wildlife. But there's still some way to go in terms of the enforcement. But the legislative framework is there, which is very important.
Thank you, Dr. Garrett, for a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would now like to take opportunity to kindly invite Mr. Soumitra Dasgupta, Director Program IBCA, to deliver his concluding remarks. Mr. Dasgupta is an Indian Forest Service officer with more than 35 years of work experience in the field as field director in different tiger reserves and head of forest force in the state of West Bengal in India, as well as in policy formulation in the Federal Ministry in Wildlife and Biodiversity Conservation, contributing immensely as the Director, Wildlife Preservation of India. He has been the focal points of many UN conventions for India, like CMS, CITES, as well as Whaling Commissioner of India. Over to you, sir.
So, am I audible?
Yes, absolutely, sir.
Okay, fantastic. So, distinguished guests, conservationists, researchers, I also saw some students and a number of members who are associated with leopard conservation joining today. We are really thankful to you for joining in this webinar. We have special thank for the scientists, the persons who are putting in a great effort for conservation of different species of leopard. Firstly, Dr. Igor, who spoke elaborately on Persian leopard. Thank you, sir. We also thank Dr. Andrew Kittle, who spoke elaborately and incisively on Sri Lankan leopard. We are also thankful to Dr. Erwin Willianto, who introduced us to the knowledge and experience of Javan leopard in Indonesia. Thank you, sir, for your kind effort. The very well-known Dr. Bilal Habib spoke about the Indian leopard, its context, its issues, and managerial interventions that has been done over the years. Thank you, Dr. Bilal. Your contribution towards today's webinar is immense, and we really thank from the base of our heart. And lastly, the person who made a lot of difference in speaking about the Saudi Arabian leopard and its real concern that we heard today, Dr. Gareth Mann, we really thank you. And we are also concerned from the Indian side, especially from the International Big Cat Alliance, and we would like to see if some help or some collaboration can be done for the revival of the species and the effort that you are putting in. Ladies and gentlemen, as we draw this insightful and inspiring International Leopard Day webinar to a close, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to each of you, the speakers, the partners, and also the participants. We extremely grateful for your commitment to the cause of leopard conservation. Today, as we celebrate the beauty and mystery of one of the world's most iconic big cats, the leopard, we also deeply reflect on its conservation challenges that we heard today from the speakers and their commitment to secure its future. Today's discussion have vividly highlighted both the beauty and vulnerability of the leopard, a species which is incredibly adaptable but increasingly under threat across its range, from the Amur forests of Russia to the savannas of Africa. And what we heard today in the Southern Arabia, leopards are facing mounting pressures from habitat loss, poaching, retaliatory killings, and climate change-related matters. Despite their wide historic range and adaptability, leopards today are in trouble, ladies and gentlemen. With the recognized subspecies, we know, except for a very few countries, their survival and their challenges, which is cutting across the globe, is immense and requires immediate attention. We in the International Big Cat Alliance, we believe that we can come together for conservation of the other 6 big cats, also the leopard, for making their life better and habitable, again, cutting across the globe, especially in the areas where leopard once inhabited. We also know that technology can play a very important role in the modern conservation landscape. Technology is our ally, and from the International Big Cat Alliance, we would like to promote technology in conservation of leopard. From the powerful camera traps powered by AI and GPS collar satellite tracking, the tools will be revolutionizing the study for the protection of leopards. Predictive models, real-time alerts, and even mobile applications are enabling conservationists to respond to faster, map leopard movement more accurately, and engage citizens in this mission. The leopard does not roar, as you all know, as loudly as other big cats, but its disappearance would echo through the ecosystem and cultures alike. We must act boldly, collaboratively, and with urgency to ensure that future generations inherit a world where leopards still roam free. Together, through platforms like International Big Cat Alliance, a unique platform of collaborative 95 big cat range countries, we can move from conversation to conservation, from awareness to action, and from the protection to prosperity for all big cat species. IBCA, ladies and gentlemen, is committed to the global conservation of all 7 big cat species, including the leopard. The alliance aims to facilitate cross-border cooperation on big cat conservation, including leopard, strengthen research policy, community engagement, share resources and best practices among the big cat range countries, including leopard, support local initiatives and capacity building for long-term impact. We believe from the International Big Cat Alliance that conservation must be collaborative, inclusive, and future-friendly. On this International Leopard Day, let us not only celebrate this magnificent species, but also reaffirm our responsibility as global custodians. Together with passion, purpose, and partnership, we can ensure that leopards continue to roam wild, free, and safe in the landscape that have been long called home to leopards. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for your participation and dedication. Let's continue the journey together, especially for the leopards, the animal that we are discussing today, for the landscape they inhabit, and for the planet we share. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful concluding remarks and aptly summarizing today's webinar. On behalf of IBCA, I once again thank today's esteemed speakers and participants for sparing their valuable time to make the webinar successful. I would also like to thank Dr. Tamali Mondal, Program Associate IBCA, for assisting in organizing this webinar successfully. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all.
Thank you. Thank you to all. Yeah. Bye. 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 Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Yeah. Goodbye.